So in this chapter, we're going to discuss the global context of business. One word that can describe current global economy is globalization, which means the tendency that the world economy is becoming a single, interdependent system thanks to well-developed transportation, communication, and trade. So globalization is characterized by the FTA, which is the free trade agreement between two countries, which is widely used, easy travels in the world, easy communications over the world, and multinational corporations. Governments and businesses are more aware of the benefits of globalization to businesses and shareholders. New technologies have made international travel, communication, and commerce faster and cheaper than ever. Sometimes a firm must expand into a foreign market simply to keep up with its competitors. So there are trade agreements and alliances. The first one is going to be the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, was an agreement to gradually eliminate tariffs and other trade barriers among the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and was eventually replaced by the USMCA, which is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. And the next one is going to be the European Union, or the EU. This is an agreement among many European nations to eliminate most trade barriers affecting member countries. 27 countries in EU now, after United Kingdom decided to exit, and it's more than just trade. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is an organization for economic, political, social, and cultural cooperation among 10 Southeast Asian countries: Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. So the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or the GATT, was an international trade agreement to encourage the multilateral reduction or elimination of trade barriers and tariffs, which was eventually replaced by the WTO in 1995, which was the World Trade Organization, is an organization through which member nations negotiate trade agreements and solve disputes about trade policies and practices to improve free trade among nations. The WTO has some power of judgment on disputes among countries. So what are the goals of WTO? They are to promote trade by encouraging members to adopt fair trade practices, reduce trade barriers by promoting multilateral negotiations, and establish fair procedures for resolving disputes among members. Let's see some terms of international trade. So trade surplus is a situation in which a country's exports exceeds its imports, creating a positive balance of trade. Trade deficit is the opposite situation. For example, the US economy is in trade deficit. The balance of payments shows flows of all money or capital into or out of a country for a quarter or a year. Major 10 trading partners in the United States are China, Canada, Mexico, Japan, Germany, United Kingdom, South Korea, France, and Taiwan for imports. And for exports, it's Canada, Mexico, China, United Kingdom, Germany, South Korea, Brazil, Netherlands, Singapore, and Japan. In international transactions, exchange rates are applied in converting one currency to another. Exchange rate is the rate at which currency of one nation can be exchanged for the currency of another nation. Spot rate is the exchange rate today for transactions today, when transactions are completed in 2 business days. Forward exchange rate is the exchange rate that will be applied at a future date, but this is set today at forward contracts. Companies and banks use this for hedging purposes. If the United States dollar appreciates, it gets stronger in exchange for other currencies. U.S. exports can shrink because U.S. products look expensive in terms of foreign currencies. U.S. imports will increase. The U.S. dollar is exchanged for other currencies. The depreciation of the dollar would increase exports and decrease imports in exchange for less of the other currencies. Competitive advantages of each country can explain why countries trade. Absolute advantage is the ability to produce something more efficiently than other countries can. Ability to produce the same good using less resources than other countries. Comparative advantage is the ability to produce some products at lower relative cost within the country. That means at lower opportunity cost compared with other countries, shows relative efficiency in an industry. For example, if Japan knows that it can do better in electronics and farming, Japan has comparative advantage in electronics. If a nation has these advantages in an industry, the nation can produce the product more efficiently at a lower cost. International competitive advantage stems from the combination of factory conditions, which is like labor, capital, or resources, demand conditions, domestic or worldwide, related and supporting industries, and company strategies, structures, and rivalries. Let's talk about international organization structures. A strategic alliance is an arrangement in which the company finds a foreign partner to contribute approximately half the resources needed to establish and operate a new business in the partner's country, also called a joint venture. One good example is one company supplies capital and technology, the other one provides marketing network for the new business. Foreign direct investment, or the FDI, happens when a company buys or establishes tangible assets in another country for production activities. General Motors established its factory in China, for example. International trade is not completely free trade. There are barriers to international trade. Most trade barriers stem from social and cultural differences, economic differences, legal and political differences, and protectionism. Protectionism is the practice of protecting domestic business at the expense of free market competition. So we have some forms of barriers. The first one we're going to look at is quota, which is the restriction on the number of products of a certain type that can be imported into a country. And we have embargo, which is the government order banning exportation and or importation of a particular product or all products from a particular country. Continuing on, we have tariff, which is a tax levied on imported products. This increases the price of imported goods and weakens marketing power. And we have subsidy, which is a government payment to help domestic business compete with foreign companies. Cartel and dumping are some legal issues we see in international market. Cartel is an association of producers whose purpose is to control supply and prices, equals monopoly as a group. Dumping is a practice of selling a product abroad for less than the cost of production, or less than domestic selling price, to increase market share, which is against the rules of FTO and FTA.